Out of the hundreds of companies that go public on the stock market each year, data shows only about 20 have been founded and led by women. In order to break the glass ceiling and achieve gender equality, Business Insider Editor-in-Chief Alyson Shontell suggests that it's necessary for women to start their own Fortune 500 companies. This can be attributed to the fact that women face a number of obstacles when it comes to traditionally rising on the corporate ladder. For more on this, let's go ahead and bring in Alyson. As I mentioned, she's the editor-in-chief of Business Insider. Alyson, thanks for being with me. As we discussed, this article says, quote, women aren't reaching powerful positions often enough when they go the traditional corporate route. Why is that?
Hi, Lana. Thank you so much for having me. You're absolutely right. When women go the traditional corporate route, they reach a number of pitfalls. The first is a Lana study found last year with McKinsey that women fall behind from the very first time there's a promotion opportunity. Men get promoted more often than they do, and so it becomes very hard for them to catch up. And so that's just one of numerous things that women face in the workforce, but that's just one example. And then if you start looking into the pay gap and things, we don't feel like the trajectory is going to put us at equal pay until about 2050, around there, 2059. It's still ways off. There's just a lot of different things. And so what I would propose is encouraging more women to think about going into entrepreneurship or getting into hopefully future Fortune 500 companies earlier so that they can start a culture of diversity from the beginning. And we can have just more diversity in corporations over time.
How are minorities specifically impacted by this entrepreneurial gap?
Significantly. I mean, so one of the startling things that we found here is that we were trying to figure out why aren't there women Jeff Bezoses yet? Why aren't there women Elon Musks yet? And a big part of the reason is that women who do start their own ventures aren't able to scale their companies to the same size as men. And that's shown in the IPO data that we found, that of thousands of companies that are currently publicly traded, only about 20 are founder-led, and those founders are women. And all the rest are men. So there's a huge, huge gap there. But for diverse founders, it's much, much worse than that. None of those 20 are Black women at all. And then when you look into a big problem, it's in the venture capital community with how these people are funding their companies before going public. And when you look at what's happening to Black women founders and to Latinx founders who are women, they get about 0.64% of all venture capital dollars that flow to companies every year, versus billions that go to all startups. For all women-founded teams, when you take out the diversity lens of color, it becomes more like about 3% of venture capital dollars. So there's a huge gap between the money that's flowing to men to start and scale their ventures as opposed to women, as opposed to minorities, which it's far, far worse.
A 2019 study by Facebook COO Sheryl Sandberg's Lean In nonprofit focused on the state of women in corporate America. And as you also mentioned, that at the current rate, it will take until 2059 for women to reach equal pay. Perhaps good enough for our daughters, but not good enough for this generation, in part because women often get stuck in number 2 positions. Only 7% of Fortune 500 CEOs are women. I'm wondering if you can give us some suggestions on how these issues can be remedied. And in particular, I want to get your thoughts on when we see women often drop out of the leadership tracks for these organizations.
So there's a number of things here. There's a lot of external factors, but there are some things that I do want to encourage women to think about for themselves. And one is just setting really ambitious career goals for yourself as early as possible, and for women to do that as early as possible. The same way that they're planning to have families and to have children when they're teenagers, like think about, you want to have a big career and you want to be big and ambitious with it. One startling stat that I found in my research was that of the women that are CEOs in one study, I found that only 12% of women planned to be CEO someday. The rest had to be told that it was something that they should think about along their career path. So like with even just a little bit more planning, maybe we can start changing that to get more women in. Ignoring the external barriers, ignoring whatever biases women face in the workforce, there's things that we can do ourselves to set ambitious goals and put us on that path. But additionally, yes, to your point, like we mentioned before, the 2059, that's maybe when we'll get equal pay. There's all sorts of things that are traditionally holding women back, which is why I think we do need more diverse thoughts, diverse people in future Fortune 500 companies, which is where you're seeing a lot of companies now that are large trying to catch up. It's really hard to change the diversity of a company that's 30,000 plus people. We just ran a story about Salesforce, which has been trying to do this for years and pouring tons of money behind diversity efforts, and they've barely moved the needle at all. I think like maybe it's ticked up to like 4% as opposed to 3% maybe in diversity measures for Salesforce, but it's really glacial pace. So if you get people thinking about it from the beginning stages of a company to what could be the next Facebook, I'm hopeful that that will move things along a bit faster.
Alyson, I have more questions to ask you, but unfortunately we have run out of time. I want to thank you for being on, and perhaps we can continue this conversation again. Alyson Shontell,
Thank you so much.
Thanks.